Paul Daugherty has had an incredible career. At Accenture, he was Group CEO for technology. He was their Chief Technology and Innovation Officer. He's written two books. He's advised many startups, sits on boards, and is now AI Advisory Chair at the large private equity firm TPG. Today on CXOTalk number 895, we take an AI reality check with Paul to examine what works, what fails, and what's next. I'm your host, Michael Krigsman. Let's get into it. Paul, welcome back to CXOTalk.
Yeah, what was it? 896? Is that what you just said?
We
That's
are,
that's
yeah,
amazing.
it, it is amazing. And you were first a guest on CXOTalk in 2016.
Yeah, we've had a number of great discussions, and it's been interesting to trace the arc of technology across our conversations.
Well, there is a lot to talk about today. So tell us about your work and your focus right now.
Yeah, well, you gave a great summary of my background. I spent a lot of years at Accenture. I was there for 38 years until I retired last year. And it was an amazing vantage point from which to see the transformational power of computerization and digital technology and everything that happened over those 4 decades. And to put it in perspective, in a way that some of you will appreciate, the first production system I wrote was in punch cards on a mainframe. So it's quite an arc from there to where we've gotten to today. And I've always been passionate about technology. And in my role at Accenture was always about leading what's next and leading us into what's next. And so when it came time to retire from Accenture, I wanted to do it in a way that really kept me engaged and involved in what was happening. Because I think we'll talk about this and unpack it today, Michael, but I think we're at the most exciting time in my career in terms of what's next, in terms of deploying the real potential of technology. And I wanted to be involved and relevant at the core of what's happening there. So I'm still an advisor to Accenture. I still do some work there. I took on a role, as you said, with TPG, which has been really exciting. TPG is a great firm. A lot of the partners are based in the Bay Area, at the heart of technology. They've been very tech forward PE firms with large PE firm, 260 billion of assets across a lot of different platforms, and it gives them a way to invest in big companies, the large companies that are impacting the direction of technology, as well as through some of their platforms involved in the leaders of tomorrow. And it's been great to come on board and work with TPG, and we can talk a little bit more about my role there as we go. But that's a part-time role, and I'm also, in addition to that role with TPG, as AI Advisory Chair is the title. I'm also doing a lot of work as an angel investor, working with some VCs and working on an angel basis with a number of founders across a portfolio of about 30 companies that kind of fit a little bit of a rubric I've got of where I see some of the next generation of opportunity coming from, and blending that opportunity, the really seed stage, early stage VC work with the TPG perspective, and a little bit of the glimpse I still get from Accenture just gives me a great variety of perspectives on how to look at things.
Paul, you do have a very broad perspective. So, where are we today? What's the state of AI? Are we in a bubble? Is all of this hype real? What's going on?
Yeah, well, there's been these waves. These things come in waves, as you all know. From as you look at the history of technologies in the 80 years or so since the invention of the transistors and underlying components, we had these waves, and AI is the biggest wave yet. With each wave comes hype and comes some element of bubbles. So yeah, there's some bubbly aspects around AI, and I'll unpack that a little bit. But before I do that, I just want to make it super clear that this isn't a bubble. There's rising, if you follow the headlines, I was just watching, CNBC this morning. There's more and more talk about, is this a bubble? Is it real with respect to AI, given some of the big things that are happening? And I'll talk about the bubbly aspects here in a second, but I just want to emphasize right at the start that it's real, like in terms of the real transformational power of the technology, and what's already happening is real. We're just at the early stages of it, which is where you see some of these bubbly things happening. So let me talk about, a little bit about, kind of what's real and what's hype, what's real, and what's missing. I think one example of hype, I think, is around AGI, artificial general intelligence. And one of the problems with AGI is there's not really an agreed upon clear definition of it. But generally speaking, people talk about AGI in the sense of general purpose AI that can exceed the capability of anything a human can do. And I think we're far, far, far from that. And there's a group of people and a group of eminent people that I respect that claim we're either there or pretty close to it. I'm with a different camp of people who would disagree with that. I think what we have today are really amazing technology that approximate a lot of the things that people can do, but that are far from real AGI, as I would think about it in terms of human capability. Mustafa Suleyman, who many of you may know from DeepMind and then Inflection, now leading AI at Microsoft. Mustafa Suleyman has had a series of posts that you should go look at if you haven't. The recent posts about consciousness and the risk of assuming of giving AI agency of things like AGI and consciousness, because it can lead to very bad human outcomes by misinterpreting what the AI really does. And I think Mustafa explains it really well. So I'd encourage you to read his post. But I think that's a bubbly aspect, and lots of people like talking about AGI. Companies are claiming they're already at AGI, but I really don't believe that's the case. What's real is what I said already. We've had AI around for 70 years. The learning branch of AI with the transformer technology and large language models is real, and it's amazing. I've said before, and I'll say it again here. I said this last year. I think it's still true. If we just froze AI right now, no more innovation, no more products, freeze it where it is right now with large language models, I think you'd have 5, if not 10 years of business adoption of what the technology can do today. Much less the massive, amazing arc that it's on. So that's what's real, is that the technology today does have a real potential.
Can
Yeah.
I interrupt you
Yeah,
right
sure.
on this point? If we were to freeze it today, that implies that companies have seen benefits, they're getting benefits. Just
Yep.
what are those benefits? So apologies for interrupting you, Paul.
Yeah, no, good. Good question. The benefits, I think, we're seeing already today. There's the areas where, generally speaking, we should unpack this a lot more and maybe go into some detail on it. But generally speaking, there's benefits in the obvious areas you see, like coding and software engineering. A lot of advances being made there. A lot of great tools there. In customer service types of applications and marketing applications. Again, can go into detail. One organization I'm working with that had 30% increase in productivity and 60% increase in net promoter score and satisfaction by introducing new forms of generative AI into their customer service organization. And then in different industry kind of functions and such that we can kind of unpack a little bit. So there's real opportunity in there already. But just circling back, maybe I just want to finish one thought on the what's missing from AI, because it's really important to where things are right now. I think everybody's a little too centered just on the large language models and the scaling law around large language models. And I think to get the next level, to get to anything approaching AGI, and to get to the next level of business improvement, we really need to focus on other forms of AI. And there's a lot of things out there: large quantitative models, liquid AI, a number of other things that are getting more at symbolic AI. Jan LeCun has been talking a lot about this, and I think the combination of the amazing things large language models can do and bringing that learning branch of AI together with the symbolic AI techniques is what's really going to propel us to kind of a next level of what we can do in business and next level of what AI itself can do.
What about the impact on organizations? You wrote a book and a year ago pulled out and sections from it that appeared on the cover of Harvard Business Review. And you said this: most business functions and more than 40% of all US work activity can be augmented, automated, or reinvented with Gen AI. So as you look back a year later, how does that prediction stand up?
Yeah, it was embracing Gen AI at work was the article on Harvard Business Review. And yeah, that came out of research, as you said, from our book, and 1,500 organizations, lots of research that we did. And a year later, we were low. The 40% was low. I think we significantly understated it. We've done some additional research, and you can peg it above 50% now in terms of, and that's looking at work hours that people expend, that all of us do, that can be impacted by, or that will be impacted by generative AI. Where we are, so the coverage, so to speak, the surface area that it impacts is increasing, or the potential is increasing. The actual what's happening is still pretty light, so let's just be real about this today. In terms of adoption, we're still in the early stages. From some other research that we've done, the we would take a different cut and say that about 15% of organizations have made significant, 1/5 have made some significant progress on scaling AI somewhere in the organization, 15%. Another roughly a third of organizations, so the balance of, to get you to 50%, are close on the heels and, kind of doing things, working to scale. And about 50% are still more in the kind of experimentation, trying things stage, and maybe individual use cases in parts of the organization, those types of things. There's over 50% of the work can be affected, but that's not happening today. That's the potential, and organizations are working to get there. And I think one of the myths about generative AI now is, I think you hear a lot of the tech industry talking about it. It's like there's an easy button. Just buy this and implement it and hit the easy button, and you transform your business for generative AI. That's not the case. This is really hard, probably harder than the technologies that come before. This is harder than cloud and the cloud transformation, because it's invasive in your organization. It's changing processes, it's changing roles of people, it's re-educating people and transforming your organization. You had to do some of that always, of course, with past technologies, but this is taking it to another level with AI, which means we got a lot of work ahead of us to get there.
Folks, I want to remind you that you can ask questions. If you are on Twitter, X, use the hashtag CXOTalk. If you're watching on LinkedIn, just pop your question into the chat. And I urge you to take advantage of this opportunity. When else will you have the chance to ask Paul Daugherty pretty much whatever you'd like? So take advantage of it, ask your questions. Paul, you use the term invasive. What is it about AI that requires this invasiveness on organizations as companies adopt it?
There's two dimensions of the invasiveness, at least. Maybe there's more. There's at least two. I'll talk about two dimensions of it. One of which is the technology is invasive, and organizations are starting out with legacy systems, with technology debt that's been talked about a lot for years. So I won't go into that in detail. But the average organization still spends 50% to 2/3 of their budget keeping lights on legacy rather than new capability. It's much higher than that in a lot of organizations, and it's not just in that creates an investment challenge, but it also creates a real anchor and roadblock to getting new capability introduced. And AI is significantly different. You have a lot of work to do at the data level, with your data fabric and getting that in shape. You have a lot of work to do at your architecture and application layer, at your middleware layers. And some of that technology is immature. We can dive more into this if you or your audience would like, but we lack categories of products right now. There is not really good, mature, agentic middleware out there for organizations to tap into, and that's still an evolving product category. So on that technology dimension, this is hard work. The second dimension that makes it hard is the process dimension, because unlike cloud, which a lot of the benefits of cloud were technical, I can move to elastic capability and external data centers and things and reduce a lot of costs. And yes, there was business impact, but you got a lot of benefits. To get the benefit from AI, it's going invasively into processes and changing the way people work. And that's hard to do. There's change management issues, there's organizational issues often where things cut across silos. For example, I'm working with the organization which that's looking at AI in customer service. But they realize the big benefit for them isn't just in customer service, it's integrating across product management and product innovation so that they can really dramatically shorten the cycle time between getting product, customer feedback and product innovation out there. And that's really hard to compress those two functions into one and make it all work the way they want to with AI. And that's an example of the invasiveness on that process side. And then you can get into cultural change and everything else that's part of it. But those are at least a couple of the dimensions that make it difficult.
So, according to what you're saying, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, AI is a forcing function for relatively broad organizational change with tentacles and implications that extend in a lot of directions. Is that an accurate way of re-saying what you just said?
I think so. I'll put it a slightly differently, but I think it's maybe saying what you just said, which is, you know, your AI strategy is kind of your business strategy. And yeah, there's the big debate in organizations. They want to do AI. Do they need an AI strategy? I'd argue, generally speaking, what you're really doing is thinking about your business strategy with AI as a significant enabler, along with whatever other things are in the mix that you're dealing with, the macroeconomic issues and everything else that's going on. Um, so yeah, so you have to get into the what's happening in the business. Now, there's things you can do more easily. You get some additional incremental productivity by rolling out Copilot tools and doing a variety of things. So yeah, you can do that, but to really get some of the bigger benefits and look at the impact and how you can get there faster than your competitors and some of these broad organizational and process transformation, that takes more work.
So, one more question, then let's jump to audience questions because questions are starting to come in, and I encourage you guys ask your questions. So, Paul, this type of change, it sounds like you're describing ERP and business process transformation from, 25 years ago. How is
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
how
Go
are we
ahead.
different? How are we different today?
Yeah. Um, the I've used that same analogy, so I think that's not a bad analogy. Client server technology is what propelled business process reengineering, the famous Michael Hammer book, and everything that some in the audience will remember from the '90s. And that the message there was similar, like you can't create the superhighways of tomorrow by paving the dirt paths of yesterday. And that's similar to the message that I was just saying. I think it's just broader. You look at the surface area of an organization that client server impacted, and it was quite low, whereas AI is impacting pretty much everything that an organization can do. So I think it is a similar message, in a similar need to step back and rethink about it. And that's why I call it, rather than re-engineering, I call it reimagining. You really have to step back and look at the art of the possible, because you don't just have your human workers and customers in the mix. You have your AI agents, and you have AI customers and partners that are going to be part of your interaction that you're thinking about. So it does really require this kind of reimagination capability.
So there is this great deal more flexibility, obviously, and therefore the innovation potential goes so far beyond efficiency into things we can't even think about. We can't even imagine hardly today.
Yeah, well, one of the this is a consumer example, but just to give you an example, there's a consumer app. Oh shoot, I just forgot the name of it. But it's a consumer app that has an agentic approach to allow you as an individual uh, to commission it to renegotiate like your streaming subscriptions and all sorts of different things. And it's a great service because how many streaming subscriptions do you have? Do you know where they are, and what you pay for, and which ones you watch, and everything? And it's hard to like call the companies and cut things off and everything. So this will do it on your behalf. It's agentic. So you just say, I want more of this, less of that. Here's my general parameters. Reorganize all my subscriptions for me, and it goes beyond streaming to all your other wireless and everything else. And the agents do it for you. And by the way, the agents are talking to agents and APIs and things at these companies. And think about that. Like that's a simple example. It's just an app today, a relatively small app. But that's kind of like the early days of mobile, the early days of internet and everything. That's kind of a proxy for the kinds of interaction you need to think about in your strategy going forward, which is very different than today.
Okay, let's jump to some questions from folks who are watching. And I'm going to start with LinkedIn and then jump over to Twitter. And so the first question is from Ansar Hassan, who says, how are your experiences from the 70s, 80s, and 90s shaping your AI journey, transformation, and especially your perspectives on the bubble in AI and AGI?
It's a great question, and thanks for dating me back to the '70s. I was using technology then, but I was pretty young in the '70s when I was doing it. But I do remember the first time I used a calculator. That was how mind blowing that the calculator was. But anyway, technology's moved on to more powerful things. The I would say one of the formative experiences of my life, the first formative experience of my life actually wasn't the calculator. It was when I walked into a the library at my university in 1983 or four. I forget exactly which year. I think it was 1983. And I saw an Appaloosa sitting on the table, and it was just mind blowing compared to the technology at the time. You saw the future. It was Steve Jobs' baby before the Mac. The Appaloosa. It just blew my mind, and that's what led me on the path to want to get involved in building technology like that. So kind of. So that the technology at that time, to answer your question on Zar, inspired me to do what I do today in a lot of ways. But what I learned from that experience is there's timeless principles around technology. And I think the fact that I was a computer engineer, I studied hardware as well as software in college and compilers and language theory and stuff like that. And I think that foundation of understanding how transistors really work, how circuits and things really work, and how bootstrap operating systems to develop applications, that kind of insight and to understand hardware on up through software and application layer into user experience is what it really stands the test of time. And it's really helped me as every technology's come along, really interpret and understand the technology and break it down into its constituent parts. So, and I talk to people a lot about this from a career perspective because people get concerned about, hey, things are moving so fast or my skills are going to be relevant. I think you have to think about the things that you know and the knowledge and such that's timeless and how to readapt that knowledge, from one generation of technology to the next. And if you can do that, you'll be super successful because a lot of those lessons still transfer. For example, in the 80s, I learned about the ilities, performability, reliability, security, et cetera. Those same things are the timeless principles you architect for and engineer for in the systems of today. So a lot of these things stand the test of time. You just need to adapt your mindset and learn.
Okay, let's jump to another question. This is from Arsalan Khan, who's a regular listener. He asks great questions, and this question is no exception. He says, is adoption of AI slow because executives who may not have a lot of vision in different departments can't or won't make sense of it beyond just replacing full time equivalents? And I'm just going to append on that. Maybe this is also a good opening to talk about the impact on shifting work patterns, job displacements, and the impact of AI on the economy.
Yeah. It's yeah, that's a great tie in there, Michael, too. So I'll start and then segue into there. And Arsalan, yeah, good question. I think there is correlation and work to do there. If I look at, I said earlier, about 15% of organizations are scaling, AI, or really, production scaling, significant things in AI that are having impact. And if I correlate that to C-suite at those organizations, they're pretty tuned in. Some of those organizations, the CEO themselves are meeting with the foundation model companies and getting deep in. They're using generative AI themselves. And I think that's a characteristic of the early leaders. It's different than it was in cloud and internet and other things where the CEO didn't necessarily need to be hands-on and personally involved. I think you do with AI because it's so fundamental and foundational in terms of the change it enables. The way I kind of encapsulate all that into a simple saying is what I tell CEOs and C-suites when I'll tell anybody when I talk to them is generative AI in particular is not a spectator sport. It's a participant sport. And if you're in it in any way, you need to play it. You need to do it. You need to be using it. And I'd say if you're not, don't just use ChatGPT, try Claude and see how it's a little different. Then try Perplexity or DeepSeek and see how that's a little different. And that'll inform a perspective. Now, it doesn't mean a CEO needs to spend all their time doing these things, but it's hard to appreciate the power if you don't use it. That's one thing that's different about the technology today. That was a little bit anecdotal what I just said, but we have survey data around this that's saying that organizations and leaders that embrace and understand AI are more effectively driving the transformation, driving the communication down to the employees across their organization and affecting the change. So I think that is a real thing. And I think the good news is I'm seeing a lot more willingness and openness from leaders to kind of embrace it. To your point, Michael, the tie-in then on shifting work patterns, this is I mean, we're starting to see the evidence, I guess, finally. We've been doing a lot of hand waving, myself waving a lot of hands as well about the impacts on the workforce. And I've done a lot of research around this that was in my Human Plus Machine book. And my primary view that I'll state here, though, is my view continues to be based on all the research that the primary application of AI is still augmentation, which is why that plus sign in human plus machine is the most important part of the book. I still strongly believe it's human plus machine, and that's where the majority of the opportunity lies. But of course, like with any technology, there's also automation and and replacement that'll come with it. And we're just starting to see the early signs and maybe evidence of where that's coming. There was a great paper by Eric Bernolfson called Canaries in the Coal Mine. Came out recently, and it's based on the most rigorous study yet of job data and such coming out, very recent data. The data came from ADP, the big payroll company. And the conclusions, I think, were really important. It talked about the fact that the majority of impacts today in the workforce are felt at the entry level. And they saw a 13% decline in employment levels, kind of at the early entry level, early 20s kind of stage of the workforce. But they also found that was correlated to automation jobs versus augmentation jobs. The augmentation jobs, as you look in that early cohort, as well as through more advanced cohorts, through their career, the augmentation roles kind of were increased and saw, or either were stable or increased and saw a lot more opportunity. So, so I think we're just starting to see this. I wouldn't proclaim to have the crystal ball and say exactly where it's going, but I think in the future, people are really important. I think AI will be a differentiator, but companies are going to catch up to each other in AI. I think that a lot of the differentiator from one company to their competitor is going to be the quality of the people and the way that people are enabled to use AI. And that's what I'm encouraging a lot of execs to focus on. Two things, advance in AI fast, you're ahead of your competitors, and advance your human capabilities fast. Your people use AI, better than the people at your competitors.
Eric Bernolfson also recently published a paper where they analyzed call center workers, and they
Yep.
found that especially more junior workers had a 15% increase in productivity when they had Gen AI tools available to them. But the real impact was on these junior workers as opposed to more senior ones. And there are other studies as well. One of the implications is that we are potentially, or AI is potentially destroying the pipeline of junior folks who ultimately would become more senior people in organizations. That's another type of displacement.
Yeah, I think there's still some learning we need to do about those effects. I think one of the in Eric's paper, one of the things he talks about is we kind of need to understand why the models, why is that happening? So I think part of the why is the models are good at ingesting some of the same things the students learn in college and such. So I think there's a shift in learning. And I was at a university recently, a top university, a really good university, and there was a debate about how much they should let the students use Gen AI. And my answer was, let them use, you got to enable them to use it as much as they can, because that's going to be the trick to solving that entry level, worker thing. That the students need to come out equipped to have, their own superpowers developed beyond what we used to think of these jobs needing. And I think we just got to think about that moving very quickly. So again, I think we'll have more and more data points on this as we go, but I think there's some changes in education and how we learn that we need to factor into there too.
Folks, keep your questions coming in. Take advantage of this opportunity to ask Paul Daugherty pretty much whatever you would like. And also, subscribe to the CXOTalk newsletter right now. Go to cxotalk.com because we have live shows and we have amazing, really genuinely amazing guests. So subscribe to the CXOTalk newsletter. Do it now. We have a question from LinkedIn, on LinkedIn from Larry Rubinacher. It's a very specific question. He says, what do you see as some of the key AI apps for the utilities industry?
Okay, yeah, I know Larry, so thanks for the question, Larry. And Larry probably knows I did work in utilities across my career a decent amount. I think it's probably utilities is an interesting industry because you've got services, customer service and billing and things like that. You've got manufacturing like process manufacturing like capability, generation, transmission, distribution, et cetera. You've got construction type of capability. So utilities is kind of a microcosm maybe of a little bit of everything that you have across other industries. So I think there's clearly opportunities in that customer service area, but like we're seeing across industries. And I know that's an area that I've done some work in, and I know that a lot of utilities have done work in. Yeah, so I think a clear area of opportunity in the mix. In the kind of more the operations side, there's been some really interesting work and innovative work that some utilities have done around using AI for things like wildfire prevention. In the West Coast of the U.S. in particular, where fires have been a cause of major outages and system issues. They're using AI in a couple of ways. One is to detect fires more quickly using AI analysis of satellite imagery and all sorts of things you can get. But they're also doing one utility in particular is working with my former company is doing some work to look at how do you equip workers to go into very hazardous wildfire environments to preserve, protect the infrastructure, which is very difficult to do. So a lot of implications like that in utilities as well. There's some interesting things going on in emissions management for utilities to help utilities monitor emissions. For example, things like tracking methane leaks or tracking methane burnoff in different ways to allow utilities to operate more sustainably. So I think there's a lot of use cases in utilities because again, it kind of pulls in a lot of these use cases that happen across the other industries. Utilities just as a challenging environment sometimes because of the rate-based model and the way capital is allocated. It's sometimes hard to invest, in those opportunities, but I think there are a lot of opportunities.
You really do know about utilities.
Hopefully that wasn't too detailed for the crowd, but
That was great. Okay, we have another question, and this is from Joy Tuhan, and she says, Paul, it was great working with you at Accenture. What are some KPIs and metrics that organizations should use to show AI is creating real business value? It's a really important question.
yeah, it's a really important question. I think it's I've been asked that question before and I've thought about it, and I think it's the same metrics businesses use. It needs to be part. If AI isn't moving the performance metrics on like the page one scorecard of the company that they track, whatever they did, an organization, they're going to track all sorts of key metrics to their business from days services outstanding to accounts receivable, also to all sorts of productivity measurements and manufacturing and other things. And I think if AI isn't making an impact on those things, I don't think you're looking at AI right in terms of the impact it can have. So I think it's a matter of looking at the KPIs that are critical in your business and understanding which of those can be dramatically impacted by AI. In my Accenture role, what we did to pick up directly on Joy's question, what we were looking at with AI even before generative AI, with just AI, classical AI, so to speak, before, we were looking at for example, our software development processes and looking at how do we improve the efficiency and productivity of those every year, and we were improving them about 10% a year every year. And we'd measure that to make sure we got those kinds of outcomes. So I think the key is not necessarily a whole new set of outcomes, but to be very intentional about the AI projects that you're pursuing and be able to tie those to the page one metrics that you manage as a company. Of course, you're going to have other metrics for your AI programs. Are the programs working right? Are they successful in delivering value and everything? But I think that's key. The one other element of that I was going to mention, but maybe in some other context, but that is critical is I think organizations also need to avoid AI use case itis. There's too many organizations that I walk into that very proudly show me 100 use cases of AI across the whole org. They got so many. They're so excited. They got so many. I'm like, pick seven, pick five, pick a number, but focus and pick a few and really tie them to something that makes a difference in your company and make them happen. I don't think it's victory to have a lot of use cases. I think it's victory to have a small number of use cases that make a difference. So you can, show the value, show the impact on your company, and then move to do more.
I have to reinforce that comment. There are so many folks who describe who have chopped up the organization, evaluated the organization, and identified all of these use cases. But as you said, identifying use cases and putting people to work in so many different areas does not necessarily help you reach the finish line.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think you can solve small problems and miss the bigger problem. There's one large consumer goods organization that I worked with. We worked on AI in the sales arena, and the initial use cases were around how do we get sales leads better to make a sales rep more effective and all sorts of things. It turns out the bigger use cases the bigger productivity improvements, I should say, were cutting across use cases. So how do you combine a salesperson's productivity with things like inventory availability and delivery times so that you could cut across that and get things to customers faster. And there's a whole different way of thinking. How can you move product to customers faster rather than just making an individual salesperson more effectively? And you'll miss opportunities for those bigger reimagining, if you just get caught up in use cases.
Let's take a couple more questions, and then there's some other topics that I want to talk with you about. And I'm going to ask you to answer these a little bit shorter simply because I want to give everybody a chance, and we're going to run out of time.
That was a very polite way to say I'm being too long-winded.
So no. You're being great. I just wish we had more than an hour.
Yep.
Okay, so this is from Bhavana Bhagat, and Bhavana says, is the talent transformation with AI for real, or will it be another RPA?
Oh, wow. Good question. Yeah, AI risks being another RPA if deployed the wrong way. I think RPA was kind of had this problem of being a little fragile. You use the RPA technology, robotic process automation, for those who aren't familiar with it, which is being able to stitch together and automate processes across different systems. I mean, very powerful technology, does a lot of great stuff, but I think it hit limits in terms of what it could do and wasn't flexible to adapt to changes in the underlying systems, generally speaking. I think the AI could be subject to the same limitations if not deployed very well. So I think the architecture of how you deploy AI is super important. The way you insulate from changes in underlying foundation models is super important. And I think, architects are back. For those of you listening, if you're enterprise architects, we need a lot more enterprise architects, to shape these AI solutions going forward that really understand all these things, because it's super important. And otherwise, you can end up with brittle AI systems as well. Now, Bhavani, in your question, you said talent transformation. I do think, so I'm not sure exactly what you meant by the talent transformation related to RPA and AI, but there is a I think a broad kind of reskilling of people, develop software engineers, developers, architects, et cetera, to learn AI, maybe more so, and well, certainly more so than people needed to advance their skills with the RPA era. So I think that is part of the journey ahead too.
Okay, another couple of questions, then we're going to jump to some new topics. And folks, put those questions in because now's your chance. Take advantage of it. Let's see. Sachin in Namdar says, he's from Accenture. He says, what are your thoughts on the future of the consulting business going forward?
Good question, Sachin. And by the way, I'll say on the questions, it's always a disappointment if I end a session like this without at least some good disagreement. So feel free to toss out any question you want. I'm happy for challenges as well. But Sachin, on the consulting business, I think services, generally tech services, let's just include consulting, systems integration, and outsourcing, all that stuff together. Tech services generally, I think is hugely impacted by everything happening with generative AI. And it's probably the biggest impact from it, more of an impact than any of the previous technology changes. And what that means is it's that the industry is at the center of some of the changes that are happening, which means it's both a threat and an opportunity. It's a threat because I think the existing way that consulting happens, the existing ways that systems integration and outsourcing happens, aren't going to be the ways to do it, or are already not the ways to do it in the Gen AI world. So I think the challenge for any company, for Accenture, for any company in the industry, is how to be first and ahead in transforming to the new processes. So on the consulting side, rather than having smarter people and good knowledge capital and walking in with a better presentation to the CFO's office, that was yesterday. Tomorrow, what you need to walk in with a foundation model with pre-trained on the client's data, and in the CFO's office be remodeling their business dynamically in the first meeting. And that's a big transformation on a lot of levels, and that's emblematic of what needs to happen in the industry and what organizations like Accenture I know are working on.
And what does that do to the consulting industry when you have a lot of people whose primary skill was listening? And now they have to, of course, still listen, but there are so many more dimensions, and the talent pipeline has not necessarily prepared them for that.
Yeah, a good follow-up question. So the way to frame that is you still need to listen. I think this stuff is hard, as I've been emphasizing a lot as I've gone through. Clients need help in doing this. So I think there's a big role for services organizations to help companies do this faster, better, more effectively. So I think there's a big need for services to do that. But they need different shape to it. So an example, you need more forward deployed engineers, in the business to more quickly drive change for the client. So it's a matter of transitioning the talent, which I think companies have been, Accenture as an example, have been very good at transitioning and retooling talent. It's about rethinking the workforce. The degrees of leveraging pyramids and things like that will change, depending on the type of work as you look at this going forward. It's about moving services to software. So what of the services that are provided, where are there opportunities to platformatize, if that's a word, or transition to services, kind of the Palantir model in that way. So I think those are some of the changes, and organizationally, talent-wise, technology-wise, Michael.
Okay, I want to kick off a discussion on success and failure, but we have a question from LinkedIn that I think helps us make that transition. And this is from Ebru Bayer, who says, there are still organizations out there who haven't done cloud transformation. They're lacking data quality and governance. Do you see any prerequisites that organizations should focus on before jumping into defining an AI strategy or executing that strategy?
Yeah, I mean, short answer to this one is those are impediments, but you can't wait. So it can't be sequential where I'm going to do my cloud and data, and then eventually I'll get to AI. So there's some companies that have decided that. There's some companies I've worked with who have looked at it and said, "Man, I'm in such bad shape on data. I'm just going to do that, and then I'll deal with AI once I'm done with that." That's a small minority, though. I think most realize, okay, I got a lot of work to do on the data side, but I gotta get some elements of AI working. I gotta make progress on my journey, and they're melding the two together. So I think it's, you got to look at your specific circumstances. Those are big impediments. Many companies, I'd say most companies, have some variety of the challenges that you mentioned, Ebru. But it's a matter of figuring out how do you parallel track it and manage that in an effective way.
Okay, we are plowing forward fast. Let's talk about adoption, success, and failure. What can go wrong? We have all heard about a recent MIT study that said 95% of Gen AI projects fail. Now, there are some issues with that study. Maybe you could say it was talking mostly about proofs of concept. Nonetheless, when it comes to Gen AI, what does failure mean? What causes failure? How do we even recognize it?
Yeah, I think the MIT study, everybody should read it. First of all, it's worth reading. But I do believe, I think it came at a time in the market news and when people wanted to seize on it and use the message that 95% of projects were failing, like the headline, in different ways. So I think it was unfortunate that it got the traction in the way it did, because I think that's kind of a misleading conclusion. And I don't think 95% of Gen AI projects are failing. I have a surface areas of hundreds of AI projects that I see, and it's nowhere near 95% failure. That generally speaking, people are making progress in different ways. Um, so anyway, the what does cause the failure, though, to get to the heart of the question, I think it's there
And
are
so,
yeah.
Paul, I'm sorry. And what is failure? How do we define failure? And then, if you can
Well,
describe what causes.
I mean, the way I would define failure is you don't achieve the business objectives you set out to achieve, which gets into one reason for failure is sometimes they don't there's no clear North Star of what they're trying to achieve or no clear metrics from a business perspective. So that's how I define failure. There's other, I guess you could define it other ways, but I think that's one way I see it. I've seen people develop great individual use cases that they couldn't scale. I'd say that's an element of failure too, because they realized they developed a great POC on a small scale, but they realized they were missing the data or whatever they might have needed to go scale it more. So I guess there's five things that I find that companies that are successful are focusing on. And I've been talking about these for a while. So these aren't necessarily new if you've heard me talk in the last few months, but there's five consistent things that I've been seeing. One is the value point that I just mentioned, Michael. Back to the definition. You need to focus on the value, have a business case, tie it to metrics, and understand what that business case is. And in value, generally will mean really looking across the use case items and looking at things that are reimagining the process that are doing something significant. So this value piece is important. Sounds obvious. Why wouldn't everybody do that? But not everybody does. A lot of people are starting in different ways. The second point that reason for success or obstacle is what I call the digital core in data, and that was at the heart of the question we just answered. But sometimes companies don't have their digital core, the systems in place. If you're not on SAP's S4, for example, their new generation of SAP, you don't get access to their AI. So you got to get your digital core in place and upgrade your SAP to the latest version to get access to the AI, as an example. So I think getting your digital core in place and getting the data in place is key, and companies are generally speaking behind on the data piece, but that can cause failure or limit the effectiveness. The third piece is talent and underinvesting in the people, and this is the talent to do AI. Like, you have people who can do the AI, but it's more broadly the talent across the workforce. Are you training the workforce with what they need to do? I think there's some best in class examples of companies that are doing a great job of educating their entire workforce on AI and what they're doing and what their objectives are, and involving their workforce bottom up. And these tend to be enlightened leaders who kind of get it, bottom up, incorporating their workforce. Great things at companies like Merrick, like Walmart, I think, are examples of companies doing this, that 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 are really building the talent base they need going forward and the learning systems they need. The fourth point is responsible AI, and really putting the guardrails around it so you're not getting into trouble as you do AI. The leading companies, I think, are doing that well. And the fifth point is viewing it as an ongoing multi-year change program. So you're building the capacity for technological and process and organizational change into your approach, rather than viewing it as getting one use case or one project right. So those are the characteristics that I see of companies they're doing well.
Folks who are listening, if you're watching on LinkedIn, we're going to run out of time. So can you do me a favor? And that is look through the questions. And if there's a question you can answer for somebody else that has asked a question, just pop your response into the LinkedIn chat. And so let's get some communication going among the folks who have asked questions. I think that would be a very nice thing to do. Paul, God, there's so much to talk about and so little time. Let's talk about private equity and venture capital. Just give us some insight into your role at TPG as AI advisory chair.
Yeah. It's a fun role. Again, it's a great company. I'm still early. So what I'm going to tell you is based on a few months on the job, basically. But as I said earlier, TPG, large private equity firm, 260 billion in assets, and they span all these different platforms. It's not just buyout capital. It's growth. They have growth capital. They have credit. They have real estate. They have impact funds. They're climate funded, and others that are focused on impact investing. And it's really an amazing opportunity to combine across those. And the reason they brought me onto the team is it's a very tech forward team. They really understand it. They've been investing. They've been very successful investors in a lot of domains, including technology, for many years. But they really wanted to look at, how where technology is creating opportunities and how to accelerate some of the opportunities that they see. So the role as AI advisory chair is to help with the overall strategy and investment themes and work across those different capabilities that I just discussed, looking at where there's opportunities, helping, on deals that they're doing, new deals that they're doing, and also work on pulling together, expanding the network, pulling in other expertise on AI, building other connections in AI that'll help them, be even more effective going forward. And it's again been a lot of fun. And given their scale, they can have impact, kind of on a impact on a big way, which has been very exciting to see. So again, that combined with the VC angle has been a lot of fun to see it from both perspectives.
As you're looking at startups and investments, of course, the traditional evaluation points have been the product market fit, the team, and so forth. How does AI now fit into investment analysis and decision making?
Yeah, I think there's a strategic thing. I'll go through this first. There's a strategic thing you have to look at that's a little different, and I'll talk about technology related companies first, but it's not just technology, but this, I mean, phrase couch this in technology terms. I think there's like five ways that AI can impact a technology company. First, it can be no impact. So AI doesn't impact it at all. That's number one. Rarely the case, but it could be the case that's the case. The second is AI enhances, what the SaaS model or whatever the company does today. And look at Workday as an example. The new agentic, they just had some new announcements at Rising this week, and AI enhancing, the capability of what they do. I think that's the second level or second example. The third level is the AI becomes more important than the underlying SaaS product or whatever itself. And the AI is the focus. I'd argue that when you look at GitHub, when you look at maybe ServiceNow now, when you look at the future of Salesforce, the AI, becomes the defining capability around the product. The next level would be AI goes even further and commoditizes the underlying technology. Look at Klarna and the way the CEO of Klarna has talked about the impact of generative AI and how he works with different enterprise software companies as an example. Maybe Zendesk, others, that fall into this, kind of fell into this pattern. And then the fifth level is AI just compresses the whole spend in the category because you don't need the software. Chegg might be a good example of this. Chegg, the learning company, who when the generative AI models came out, people flocked to, for free or whatever, for very low cost, to generative AI models, and Chegg lost a lot of its population there. So it goes. That's kind of a little bit of a framework to look at. I think you have to look at that from an investing perspective. Really look at that and understand not just today, but if you look at the move of the market space in the next years, what the impact is.
You mentioned Zendesk. We recently had the CEO of Zendesk on CXOTalk discussing their AI transformation. So if anybody's interested in that, we had an in-depth discussion. So just go to cxotalk.com to check it out. All right, let's take another question very quickly now because we're just running out of time. And this is from Sufyan Ben Sabur, and he says, "What is next after AI beyond AGI?" And really quickly, please, Paul.
Okay. I think the things to look at beyond what we currently consider as AI and AGI, I think look at physical AI. I know you said beyond AI, but not many people are focused on physical AI, which is where really Elon's going with X and XAI and everything he's doing, and where World Labs and organizations like that are going. So think physical AI and AI meets the real world as one thing. Look at quantum. It's still general purpose quantum, still a number of years off, but some specific impacts of quantum happening fast. And related to this real world blending thing is robotics and the massive advances in robotics and these new physical world models that are coming, helping us make, I'll predict on the show right here, we're going to have a moment probably bigger than a ChatGPT moment around physical AI and robotics and what they can do. That's coming relatively soon. Maybe even bigger to us in realization than, again, the ChatGPT moment.
How soon?
I think that's within a couple of years, in terms of really seeing these physical models and, what they can do, say maybe 2 years, certainly about 5 years.
Okay, very, very quickly, Stephen Redmond on LinkedIn says, how can organizations get ahead on organizing and cleaning their data while not losing momentum on AI adoption? Really fast, please.
Quick thing is really think about your business case, because what I see time and time again at organizations is people coming up with great data plans and data strategies, and it gets shot down by management, whatever, because there's not a business case tied to it. So I think you need to think about how to link your AI benefits or whatever benefits you have, an ERP transformation or whatever, with getting your data state advanced and link things together so that your data transition, your data modernization doesn't get cut off and shut down, which is what continually has been happening to companies for the last decade or more.
Okay, very quickly now, Rajat Kumar says, what will be the future of EMR, electronic medical record applications using AI? Are some of the major players integrating AI into their apps? And what kind of integrations will that basically the future of electronic medical records?
Yeah, it's a little bit outside my deep realm, but if you look at the recent announcements from Epic at their event about a month ago, those of you that are in this space, they made a broad set of announcements and really an expansion of what you think of as EMR. They're expanding Epic's role well beyond what you thought of as EMR to get into these care provision activities where AI will really have big impact. So I think if Epic's vision of the future is right, you'll see the EMR providers playing a critical role in automating a lot of aspects of patient care, revenue cycle management, and the like. There's other views of the world which say that'll build up around the EMRs, and the question will be which vision plays out.
Okay, again, just really fast, please. Arslan Khan says, responding to your comments earlier about enterprise architecture, he is a recovering enterprise architect. He says, all jobs will be affected by AI. Are there any that are still untouchable by AI?
Well, yeah, I think generally speaking, really physical skills, that people do need to go out and do things in the real world. I think those will take a lot longer for AI to impact. I think anything where you're dealing with knowledge and information, it'll have impact. We have a lot of data. I can give you a link to send around based on different labor categories of where Gen AI will automate versus augment, and where there's no impact. I can send that out maybe as a follow-up, Michael. I'll give you the link. And that does it by industry as well as function.
Sounds wonderful. Okay, we need to talk about responsible and ethical AI. Everybody, every technology company says we are doing responsible AI. What's the reality behind that today?
The reality behind it is that I'd say less than 20%, and that's probably a generous number, of organizations are really doing responsible AI the way I would characterize the need for it. To do responsible AI right, I can't get into each one of these, but you need three things. You need principles. Everybody's got that. I want to be fairness, privacy, security, explainability, et cetera. So everybody agrees on the principles. Most organizations have that. The second thing you need is processes. How do you do it and make sure that you're doing AI responsibly? Is it baked into your software engineering practices, et cetera? Most aren't doing that. And the third thing you need are tools and measurement. Do you understand every AI use case across your organization? Do you know what the risk level of each use case is? And do you know what's being done to mitigate any bad outcomes, from irresponsible outcomes, so to speak? Most organizations aren't doing that. So we need to get beyond the principles and lip service to responsible AI to implementing really rigorous, industrialized, responsible AI. And like I said, less than 20%, probably a lot less are really at that stage.
That was a harsh commentary.
It's true. I've been preaching on this, so to speak, for about 8 years now. Involved a lot of the organizations that have been advocating for responsible AI, and it was preaching totally into the wilderness with 0% listening for a long time. So I think 20% I view as an accomplishment. We got more seriously, but I think too many organizations don't really understand that it's a business issue, because the biggest risk of AI is eroding trust. If AI is used, deep fakes, whatever, think about all the different ways AI can tarnish your brand. Um, those companies that really develop trust in the way that they're using AI are going to have a competitive advantage over other companies. This is about business and strategic value of your brand. This isn't about a feel good thing. I think too many people still think of responsible AI as a feel good thing rather than something that's strategic and essential to your competitive survival.
Paul, in one sentence, what's your view of government regulation of AI?
I think it just needs to be balanced. I think we need a government regulation that encourages innovation, leading innovation, and has the right focus on preventing the real harms, deep fake, and some of the real, obvious harms that are around us. There's a lot more to say on that, but that's the one sentence.
And one sentence, what technologies are you watching now?
Um, we've talked about a lot. I'll just say the one new thing I'm watching that I think is in the underappreciated, undervalued category, or really under thought about category maybe now is crypto. There's a lot of people thinking about crypto, but it tends to be the crypto converted that are thinking about crypto. But crypto as a general purpose technology for tokenization, not just of financial assets, but other things, data, manufacturing, et cetera. I think is poised with recent steps the U.S. has taken to really legitimize in a lot of ways, to really have a much more profound impact on businesses and everything we do than the non-crypto community is aware of right now.
And final question, what is your trajectory for the next steps in your amazing career?
I'm gonna keep doing all the fun things I'm doing now because this is kind of what I love to do. This arc of technology has been kind of my career and my life, and want to stay close to what's happening. Beyond that, it's more time with my family, which love to do, and I'm having a great time with that. And hopefully getting a little bit better at guitar, which has been my retirement project since I left Accenture. I'm trying to gear up and spend more time in guitar, but all this exciting technology stuff is taking time away.
I did notice the guitar in the background.
Yeah, I'm getting pitched on a lot of startups that can help me learn music faster. That's where I'm hopeful.
And with that, we're out of time. A huge thank you to Paul Daugherty. He is currently AI Advisory Chair at private equity firm TPG. He's an advisor to Accenture. He's doing a lot of other things. Paul, thank you so much for taking your time to be with us.
It's always fun, Michael. Thank you. And thanks to your audience. This is an amazing audience. That's what makes this so fun, in addition to all the work you put into it. And I love the questions. So thanks to all who are tuning in.
Yes, and for the folks who are watching, there's so much information that has been packed in today. By Monday, the edited video, we'll do some light editing, will be up on our site, and then next week we'll create a summary. Watch this video if you're interested in any of the topics that we've discussed. The replay will be there. You can take your time and you can unpack it. And right now, subscribe to the CXOTalk newsletter. Go to cxotalk.com. We really have amazing shows coming up. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks to Paul Daugherty, and have a great day.